Xi Jinping, a biography, written by Zhong Wen. Chapter 8 Infiltrate the United States as the Enemy. With great goodwill gesture in June 2013, the United States President Barack Obama carefully invited Xi Jinping, who had just assumed power, to a special meeting at a California estate, together with dinner to chat without ties about goodwill diplomacy, hoping that Xi Jinping would cooperate in the interests of both China and the United States for world peace. As a parting gift, Obama also sent Xi Jinping a special expensive California mahogany bench made for two people to sit, expressing the hope for China and the United States to sit together and cooperate with each other. The U.S. expressed its greatest concern about cybersecurity at the California Manor meeting, where U.S. networks were often hacked to steal intelligence and trade secrets. In terms of North Korea's nuclear test issue, the United States hoped that China and the United States' cooperation would prompt North Korea to abandon its nuclear programs. For the South China Sea security issues, the United States hoped that China would respect the South China Sea International Channel's freedom of navigation, to ensure the safety of the channel and to maintain demilitarization of the South China Sea. In response to the U.S. goodwill request, Xi Jinping has played a trick, superficially responding to it, saying yes at the table but doing another thing under the table, making up a new term, the new type of major power relationship between China and the United States. This new type of relationship, to put it bluntly, is to say one thing and do another. Superficially a false response, but in reality is fighting. For the time being, fighting but not breaking. The so-called dialogue is like a chicken talking to a duck. Xi Jinping's ambition was to take over the world when he came to power, and the United States is the biggest obstacle to his world domination. After the Manor meeting, Xi Jinping extended his fist to the U.S. as usual, strengthening his professional cyber army not only by conducting cyber espionage, but also by directing the military to enter U.S. corporate websites and steal trade secrets to supply Chinese companies for their benefit. The U.S. prosecuted 5 Chinese Communist military officers in 2014 after it found concrete evidence. The year 2015 saw the announcement that the U.S. Federal Personnel Office had been hacked by the Chinese Communist Party, stealing 21.5 million pieces of civil service data, including 5.6 million fingerprints, an illegal intrusion by the Chinese Communist hackers that caused great concern among the American public. In August 2015, NBC News reported, according to NSA information, the Chinese Communist Party's cyber attack covers all sectors of the United States, the defense industry, Lockheed Martin, the government, large companies such as Google, are the targets of the Chinese Communist Party military. A map with red dots marks 600 victim companies and government units in the past 3 years, including Washington, New York, Boston, Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles, Dallas, Miami, Detroit and many other cities. The damage caused to the United States by the CCP's theft of classified information, including data on the latest designs for U.S. military and civilian air traffic control systems, oil and electric vehicles, and drug formulas, was much more serious than the rampant piracy of the past. In September 2015, Xi Jinping took advantage of the 70th anniversary of the victory over Japan to demonstrate his military strength in a parade in Beijing, with the intention of demonstrating to the United States. Before that, Xi sent out 5 warships to the Americas, passing through 12 miles of U.S. territorial waters in Alaska. It was in fact a clear demonstration of his intention. Since then, the Communist Party of China, CPC, has ignored U.S. appeals and has continued to build islands in the South China Sea, while the third airport at Mischief Reef continues to be built. The U.S. and Chinese military planes made another dangerous pass over the Yellow Sea on September 15, 2015, and the Americans were so angry that they decided that the Chinese Communist Party was more vicious than Russia, Iran, North Korea, and LS Islam, and was the #1 enemy. Xi Jinping said on the surface that there would be no confrontation, no conflict, and that he would manage differences and cooperate for a win-win situation, but in fact he was moving toward conflict and confrontation. Out of the 5.5 million Chinese in the United States, experts estimate that 300,000 are communists who have infiltrated or served the Chinese Communist Party over the years. They are located in many Chinese groups and community groups, working as propaganda for the Communist Party, infiltrating academic groups to steal intelligence and bribing international students to use as unification tools. The activities of these communists in the United States have caused serious concern among the Americans. After 4 months of dedicated investigation, Newsweek published a lengthy investigative report in October 2020 under the cover of Xi's secret plan to subvert America, pointing out that the CCP had filtered more than 600 groups in the United States, including chambers of commerce, hometown associations, academic groups, societies, and media. It had formed pro-communist forces that greatly influenced and even controlled these groups. The Chinese Communist Party's online army had entered the U.S. and set up fake accounts on Facebook and Twitter, posting articles in rudimentary English to glorify the CCP and incite conflict and confrontation in American society. On social media sites they posted messages supporting Black Lives Matter and police crackdowns, attempting to reinforce the confrontation between the two sides and incited antagonism. Newsweek found that there were 300 fake accounts of Chinese Communist Party online forces on Twitter and 60 fake accounts on Facebook, using American names which were not real people. The International Cyber Policy Centre of the Australian Institute for Strategic Studies, AIS, found that between February and July 2020, these Chinese Communist Party, CCP, online military accounts posted messages that emphasized the racial divisions and social injustices in the United States to deliberately create internal unrest and promoted China as better than the United States. However, because of the poor English, often with Chinese characters mixed in, grammar and vocabulary use were problematic, difficult to resonate with the Americans, and even made people feel annoyed. In Australia, out of the 2,240 tweets sent by the Chinese Communist Party's online army, only 2 netizens responded with praise. It is thus clear that the Chinese Communist Party's online army is promoting the political goals of the Chinese Communist Party and denigrating the United States, but it is very ineffective due to its poor tactics. In addition to the ineffectiveness of the online army, the CCP has infiltrated the U.S. federal government, state and local governments, as well as companies, university think tanks, social groups, and cultural groups to promote programs that benefit the CCP's political and economic interests and cultivate interpersonal relationships. Newsweek's investigation has found that there are more than 600 pro-communist organizations throughout the United States that have been united by the CCP, including 83 hometown associations, 32 chambers of commerce, 38 Taiwan organizations that promote the peaceful reunification of Taiwan, 10 China Assistance Centers, and 5 China-US China Assistance Centers. 5 China-US Friendship Associations, 129 pro-communist educational and cultural groups, and 13 pro-communist Chinese media. Out of the 70 Chinese professional associations, half are infiltrated by the CCP's United Front. There are 265 Chinese students and scholars associations at universities across the United States, almost all of which are used as instruments of the CCP's United Front, controlled by education officials at CCP consulates to serve the CCP's political infiltration and propaganda. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has noted that the Chinese Communist Party has secretly infiltrated into the United States, reaching into state governments and interfering in local politics, business and community activities. A Chinese Communist Party think tank has created data on state governors, specifically rating whether they are friendly to the CCP. Since 2008, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, has proposed the 1,000 Talents program to bring in senior scientific and technological talent, most of whom are Chinese American experts and scholars, in order to gain access to various advanced technologies in the United States. In 2013, Xi Jinping came to power with great ambition and began to implement a plan to replace the U.S. world's hegemon, greatly enhancing the 1,000 Talents program by investing heavily and offering salaries 3 times higher than they got in the U.S. American projects. To publicize the achievements of the 1,000 Talents program, the Chinese Communist Party has allowed the list of participants to be published on the internet, where one can see their names, their workplaces in the United States and China, and their affiliation with universities or academic institutions. Not all scientists worked in universities, but at least 300 scientists were working in government, and at least 600 scientists were working in the United States. In 2018, the FBI noted the tendency of the Thousand Talents program to leak and steal U.S. high-tech secrets. The FBI made the Thousand Talents scholars a priority of its investigation, at the airport, repeatedly intercepting several experts and scholars who carried confidential scientific and technical information, in an attempt to leave the country. The FBI arrested and prosecuted several of them. The FBI's actions alarmed the Chinese Communist Party, which in September 2018 ordered a moratorium on publicity and reporting on the Thousand Talents program, removed the list of Thousand Talents program from the Internet and subsequently changed the name of the program to the Overseas High-Level Talent Introduction Program. The program was then rebranded but continued its ploy to pay off the applicants. In January 2018, Charles Lieber, head of Harvard University's chemistry department, and 2 Chinese-American academicians were charged by U.S. Justice with stealing U.S. technology for China and passing sensitive information to China. Lieber, who works at Wuhan University of Technology and is considered a favorite for the Nobel Prize, was charged with felony lying to federal investigators. In 2019, the U.S. Department of Energy ordered a ban on department personnel from participating in China's talent acquisition program. That same year, the U.S. Senate committee declared that heavy Chinese recruitment posed a threat to U.S. interests. The Department of Justice instructed law enforcement to pay close attention to remove scientists stealing research from U.S. laboratories. In 2018, federal prosecutors indicted Xiaorongyu, a researcher working for Coca-Cola in Atlanta, who was accused of transferring $120 million worth of trade secrets, transferring company documents to her cloud computer and taking photos of lab equipment, which earned her a Thousand Talents program bonus, but she refused to plead guilty. Boston University researcher Yanqing Yi, who was charged in 2018 with working for the Chinese government during her studies and research and concealing her identity as a lieutenant in the People's Liberation Army when she applied for admission, had fled back to China. But defining whether the law was broken was no easy task. The U.S. has a tradition of academic exchange and openness. Most universities have lax rules on off-campus employment and income, and the government has no rules prohibiting employees from joining the ranks of Chinese talent, said Peter Zeidenberg, a lawyer representing 24 Chinese-American scientists under investigation, adding that, in most cases, prosecutors did not charge technology transfer issues. Instead, prosecutors focused on the scientists' concealment of funding. The key is that the Chinese Communist Party has been willing to throw money around. Illegal, you say? Not necessarily, you say unethical. Of course it is. You call it espionage? Hard to define. Would you say illegal? Likely yes. In 2019, there was more than one accidental fall of a scientist involved in the Thousand Talents project, in California. Did someone push him to fall to his death? Or was it an accidental misstep? No follow-up reports came, leaving only room for speculation. The Chinese Communist Party has blocked information internally and invested billions of dollars each year in foreign propaganda. In addition to using mainland loudspeakers to broadcast outward, it has been infiltrating and bribing overseas Chinese media, greatly influencing the public opinion of tens of millions of ethnic Chinese overseas. Stanford University's Hoover Institution published a 213-page investigative report, Chinese Influence and American Interests, Promoting Constructive Vigilance, on November 29, 2018, warning that the Chinese Communist Party is fully infiltrating and manipulating the U.S. government, universities, think tanks, coal ministries, businesses, and the diaspora. The report, which took 1.5 years to be completed, was co-authored by 32 scholars in China. The 22-page report on the CCP's control of Chinese-language media in the United States found that the CCP had strengthened the English-language bases of state-owned media in the United States, bought out large numbers of once independent Chinese-language media, and infiltrated emerging Chinese-language websites and media. The Hoover Report categorizes CCP control of Chinese-language media in the United States into 3 categories. First, expanding the size of CCP state-owned media in the United States. Second, controlling newspapers, television or websites through wholly owned or majority ownership. And third, influencing the independence of media outlets through their business interests in mainland China. The China press is directly controlled by the Chinese Communist government, funded by the Beijing Overseas Chinese Affairs Office, and its main editors and managers are appointed by the Chinese Communist Party. The paper is referred to as a party newspaper by overseas Chinese. The newspaper also has local editions in the West and some major cities in the United States and is one of the 4 largest Chinese newspapers in the United States. Founded in Hong Kong, the New York edition of Sing Tao Daily was sold to a pro-communist businessman in the 1990s. The owner of Sing Tao Daily had become a member of the Chinese Communist Party's Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference in 1998, and his political stance was aligned with Beijing, and Sing Tao Daily had been one of the 4 major Chinese newspapers in the United States, with a large readership in Hong Kong, Guangdong, and China. The World Journal is sponsored by the United Press of Taiwan, and its reporting position is relatively independent and objective. However, because the Taiwanese owner wants to develop business in mainland China and has advertising interests involved, the editorial position of the World Journal has changed. It avoids touching the sensitive nerves of the Chinese Communist Party in international reporting and commentary on the U.S.-China relations and Taiwan mainland relations. On the surface, it is not very obvious, relatively hidden and not easy for readers to notice. The World Journal is still the #1 Chinese-language newspaper in the United States. Ming Pao, one of the 4 major Chinese newspapers in the United States, is popular with immigrants from Hong Kong and Guangdong but is also controlled by Beijing. Ming Pao receives funding from the Chinese Communist Party but is still operating at a loss and has ceased publication. How much money do the major newspapers receive from the Chinese Communist Party? Su Jiatuan, former director of the Chinese Communist Party's Xinhua news agency in Hong Kong, who fled to the United States at the end of 1989, said that he had directly financed the pro-communist newspaper Zhongbao, which was published in Hong Kong and the United States, to the tune of $30 million in the 1980s. The newspaper was completely abandoned by its readers because of its owner's support for the June 4 incident in 1989, when the Chinese Communist Party suppressed the Tiananmen pro-democracy movement, and companies withdrew their advertisements. In addition to the 4 major Chinese newspapers in the United States, the Chinese Communist Party has not spared any other media in the United States, and 90% of the Chinese media in the United States have fallen into its trap because they cannot withstand the financial lure. Literature City, a popular Chinese comprehensive website, was founded by a mainland student in 1997, and after it was handed over to a Chinese American from Taiwan in 2000, the new director went to the mainland to look for investment opportunities, cooperated with the Chinese Communist Party's domestic media, found more advertisers at home and abroad, and developed mainland readers. In 2011, Lin Wen, CEO of Literary City, said publicly that most of Literary City's news reports were written by the China News Service and most of the articles came from the official media in China. There are rumors that Literary City received a $1 million subsidy from the CCP propaganda department. For many years, Dovetail was an independent Chinese-language media outlet in the United States, but in 2009 it was acquired by a Hong Kong businessman who had substantial business interests in mainland China. The businessman also founded the Center for U.S.-China Relations at Tsinghua University and wrote his own pro-communist articles on the South China Sea, and Dovi is now based in Beijing. The BackChina.com, the 5th-ranked Chinese website in the U.S., was once an independent media outlet like Dovetail, but in 2017 it too fell into the arms of the Chinese Communist Party, and after the organizers attended the 9th World Chinese Media Forum organized by the China News Service and received funding from the CCP, BackChina's China coverage became increasingly positive. CNA is the overseas center of the CCP's foreign propaganda, and its president is a senior CCP official. Every 2 years, the CCP organizes the World Chinese Media Forum in China, holds advanced training courses for overseas Chinese media, invites hundreds of overseas Chinese media directors and editors, and journalists to visit China, and covers the key construction models of the Belt and Road, and serves as a sounding board for the CCP's global strategy. The CCP has done a lot of unification work for overseas Chinese media, making Chinese media, Chinese schools, including Confucius Institutes, and Chinese associations the three treasures of overseas unification war. The Hoover Report, after citing the influence of the Chinese Communist Party on the Chinese media in the United States, has pointed out that there are few truly independent Chinese media outlets left in the United States today. The only truly independent Chinese media in the U.S. today are De Ji Yuan, Look at China, Voice of Hope, New Tang Dynasty TV, and a few other not-so-large media outlets that are truly independent of the CCP. The Communist Party of China, CPC, has opened 110 Confucius Institutes and 500 Confucius classrooms in the United States, using Confucius as a signboard, and in the name of learning Chinese, teaching Chinese literature, history, philosophy, and folk culture, stuffing Xi Jinping's global governance, the community of human destiny, the CPC's 200-year strategy, inculcating communist ideology and socialism with Chinese characteristics, propaganda infiltration and directing international students in universities to participate in political activities, to oppose the visit of Tibetan spiritual leader Dalai Lama, to oppose protests against the suppression of Tibet, to prohibit discussion of topics related to criticism of the CCP and to interfere with academic freedom. The Confucius Institute is essentially a nest of spies for the Chinese Communist Party. The University of Chicago and Penn State University suspended their Confucius Institute cooperation program in 2014, and on August 13, 2020 the U.S. State Department declared Confucius Institutes to be CCP missions abroad and a CCP propaganda apparatus. The CCP has over 400 Confucius Institutes in other countries around the world. France, Canada, and Australia have closed some Confucius Institutes, and in Sweden all Confucius Institutes and classes were closed in 2020. Xi Jinping ordered the renaming of the Confucius Institute after countries uncovered its inner intentions. In July 2020, the Chinese Communist Party's Ministry of Education announced that the Confucius Institute had changed its name to the Language Exchange Center, but everyone now understands that it is an old wine in a new bottle. No matter what name is used, the substance and mission will remain the same. In January 2011, Hu Jintao intended to re-establish Confucius and approved the casting of a 9-meter-high, 9-ton statue of Confucius to be erected in the east of Tiananmen Square, but it was not allowed by Jiang Zemin, and after 3 months, the statue was dismantled in the middle of the night and put in a museum. Since Xi Jinping came to power, he visited the hometown of Confucius in Xiufu, Shandong Province in 2014 under false pretenses, seemingly advocating Confucius, but the giant statue of Confucius has remained in the museum, and in the future, even the name of Confucius will not be mentioned.